The 9 months that I dragged my feet could have killed me. My first symptom was I had a lump under my chin. I was actually going to go get food with my wife and felt that my chin felt a lump. And I asked her if she had something like that there too. She felt she didn't have anything. So I didn't think about it. I just went on with my life. I was coaching a client and it was a 5-day event. And on the 3rd day I woke up and my whole chin was swollen. And it was like bright red and everything like that. Never had any issues before like that. Came home from California, went and saw my primary care doctor. And he looked at it, said, okay, you know what, that might be salivary gland infection or something weird, you know. So he gave me some antibiotics and some steroids. Nothing worked. It subsided a little bit, maybe for a week, came back for a checkup and sent me to ENT, ears, nose, and throat. Ears, nose, and throat immediately was alarmed. The doctor kind of started feeling lymph nodes and everything. And he goes, you know what? He goes, I'm afraid it's lymphoma or something like that because I've seen this kind of weird presentation. But otherwise I felt fine, so I didn't think anything of it. So he sent me for imaging. Later that month, maybe 3 weeks later, went and got a head CT, and I had lymphadenopathy above my shoulders from the clavicle up. All the lymph nodes were swollen. They were starting to just be visible, and I could feel them just a little bit if I pushed it. He wanted to do a biopsy. And between October and when I had my biopsy in December, I started feeling everything. I started feeling kind of like tired more, started feeling very malaised and kind of just weird, not normal kind of thing. Kind of like, you're going to get sick, like you're about to have the flu or something, but it never came. It was just that same feeling over a couple months. He ended up taking this lymph node right here. And before he even finished the biopsy, he called my wife from the surgical suite and said, hey, this is not good. This lymph node is black. This is like very abnormal. I wasn't even awake yet. He wasn't even completely finished, sewing me up, being done with me. By the time I woke up in the recovery room, I was kind of told everything and that, things were not good and that I needed to, make sure this gets to pathology and whatever. I got a call from the office staff at the ear, nose, and throat doctor. And they basically said, hey, your path report's in, come and get it. That was it. So I drove up there, 15 minutes away to the CNT. The PA there handed me it and was like, I'm sorry. And then, didn't really explain anything to me. Of course, I've been looking this stuff up and, seeing that actually on paper was devastating. And I get the path report and it says, T-cell Acute Lymphoblastic Leukemia. I basically got the paper and got back in my car and sat there for about 15 minutes trying to calm myself down and called my wife. Let her know the terrible news. It was difficult. It was very difficult, especially knowing that that could be the end of my life for myself and my family and my wife. And, the other side, a bit more selfish side, into my racing career. Something that I've been building since I was 13 years old. Now I'm looking at the end of it and the end of my life, prematurely by magnitudes. About 2 weeks later, he calls me and he calls me personally, not the office. And he goes, hey, I only have half the results from everything, but it's not great. You definitely have T-cell leukemia. Because I don't know what kind yet. He goes, but we need to act really fast. Now this time I'm still kind of not wanting this to be real, so I'm kind of doubting it at the same time. Like, no, it's just a bad infection, or it's just I have some random weird disease from anything. I'm just in denial. So they call me and say, hey, when can you come in this morning? It's like 8:30 in the morning, and I'm like, sure, what time? And they're like, well, you get here as soon as you can, and bring clothes. I'm like, bring clothes? Okay, this is a checkup, right? They go, no, we're admitting you. Honestly, it didn't really hit me until I was sitting on the bed on the day of admittance. The way that I thought about it at that point was sometimes the only way through something is just to go through it. Like the only way out of the fire is to go through the fire. I knew it wasn't going to be fun, and I knew the odds weren't on my side, but I got to do something. Basically, he gave me, two options. He said, look, we can do this the easy way, And the easy way might not work. It's just going to be very easy chemo, or the hard way, which is we're going to hit you as hard as you can with as much chemo, with the highest dosage you could take, and then go from there, see what happens. My wife and I make a lot of decisions together. We both kind of went through it together because we're very close as a married couple. We both had a lot of questions for the doctor because he basically came and sat down and said, look, I understand if you go with small doses, that might make you feel better right now. You need to understand that with cancer, the best line of defense is to hit it as hard as you can the first time. If you don't, your body builds an immunity to these chemos, and there's a chance that it just won't work anymore. Or it's going to be so aggressive that it's going to overpower what the medications can do anyway. So your treatment might be for nothing. I'm going to do something. I'm going to put you on a regimen called hyper-CVAD. So he's going to do it for my induction side of my regimen. So basically mid-January to about March was going to be this period. So I spent a month and a half in the hospital, got out like the third week of February, and then spent a week out, lost all my hair from the first, range of chemo, and then went back in for another 2 weeks. By the end of all that, the end of induction, it had failed. I went in originally with like 60 to 70% bone marrow involvement. And when I was finished with that, their hopes was to be, 2% or less. I was at 28%, 30%, something still. So from that point, he pivoted really hard and went to the extreme. And we went to a young adult and adolescent regimen. Basically the hardest chemo for leukemia available on the market. And it's the most involved regimen. Basically, it was just to knock down the bone marrow involvement to as much as zero as possible before the bone marrow transplant, which was going to be the next step. That was going to be the final, the cap to the whole thing, was allogeneic stem cell transplant. I had to do intrathecal treatments. I had to do 11 basically spinal chemos to keep from CNS involvement. For central nervous system involvement. Those were not fun. From this time, they basically started going out to bone marrow donor registries. So they got my DNA profile. They did all the matching. They cleared me for the stem cell transplant, which is a whole process. You have to meet with 3 or 4 different administrators, plus the doctor and the PA. And they basically have to clear you for everything because it's such an intensive process. And then they gave me the good news, which was a bit surprising. But I had 4 extremely exceptional matches for bone marrow donors. The one they picked, which was the best of all of them, matched all of my DNA across the board. He had the same body type, same hair, same weight, same height, same everything that they match. Finally, the day comes, and the first thing you do when you admit is you go to the radiation unit. I had fractionated total body radiation, which means I went twice a day for 3 days. Morning and afternoon for 3 days in a row. The day comes, my bone marrow transplant day. That was what they call your rebirth day. So I end up, from this donor, whoever he is, he's an angel. He gave 1.5 liters of bone marrow for me. This poor nurse had to sit by my bedside for 6 hours, just opening and shutting a pet cop. Just letting a little bit in and then turning it off. And a little bit in, and she did it for 6 hours. To let the whole 1.5 liter bag flow down. So everything after that is you just, you hang on. It's like you're on a bucking bull. You just hang on for the rest of the time, and hopefully everything comes together and everything's fine. So I started going through all the effects basically about a week after I got the actual stem cells. And you start getting the traditional, I would call it radiation sickness kind of esque. You start getting a lot of GI problems. Your skin starts to peel and that kind of stuff. And it got to a point where I couldn't eat anymore. I couldn't physically keep anything down. So at this point, I had a double port in my chest on one side, and then I had a trifusion line, which was for the actual bone marrow transplant. It has 3 lines hanging out of my chest coming from another artery. So they're both in 2 different arteries in your heart. All of them were being used. I had one was pain medicine, one was just IV, whatever, medication or fluids or whatever they had going on at the time. One was TPN, total parental nutrition, because I couldn't eat anymore. Everything's starting to just be affected by the large dose of radiation at this point. So I was brushing my teeth one morning, and I got a gum bleed, and didn't think anything of it. It took me about 15 minutes to get it to stop. Now my platelets are 10, 5, something like that, way, way lower than what they should be. Like, we're talking 400, 500% lower than normal, 600%. They're almost zero. I mean, they're counting down basically every day. The next morning, I brushed my teeth and it never stopped bleeding. I didn't have any clotting factor. I didn't have platelets left. And I essentially started bleeding to death out of my gums. Basically, I let it go for about 30 minutes. And then the nurse came in. I was like, hey, I'm bleeding. It won't stop. And at this point, we're like 3 hours after it started bleeding. It's not stopping. It just keeps bleeding. I'm actually taking the blood and just taking it out of my mouth and throwing it in the trash can. It's getting so bad. I'm having a hard time breathing. My blood counts are all dropping very quickly because it's just not generating any, they're not generating enough red blood cells to replace what I'm losing. We get to like hour 6 of this. They bring the doctor in and he's like, look, we haven't done this before, but there's a cauterization team that's in the hospital. What do you think about cauterizing it? Being what I've already said earlier about just, the only way through it is through it, I said, fine, do it. Do whatever you got to do. Because it's going to be painful. I know, I understand. So about an hour later, she comes in, silver nitrate, does it, hits it, stops bleeding. Next morning, it happens again. This time it's in the back of my mouth. She has to come back in again and hit both spots. So now I've been cauterized 3 times in my mouth, my gums. At that point, basically just told me, just don't brush your teeth. It's gross. You have to understand. You're not eating anyway. My platelets started to kind of come back about a week after that, but I started being able to eat again. So as soon as they could, they took me off of TPN, and the first meal I had my wife bring me a ramen bowl, like one of the ones you just put water in and you just, instant ramen. Well, my stomach didn't agree with it. I went to sleep, had a dream of, having, going in the bed, and decided to jump out of bed, trip over my trash can, and face plant onto the tile with no platelets. I thought I was smart, and I caught myself in my arm as I went down, and I didn't catch myself as well as I thought I did. Somehow I managed to go from the bed to almost the hallway to the door of the room, but there was blood all over the place around me. I didn't know where it was coming from, so I crawled over the bed and hit the panic button as hard as I could. And of course, you do that, 15 nurses come flying in there. Turns out I cut my foot open, or my toe, on the trash can when I tripped. And then I also hit my head. You could already see it starting to swell. My face was starting to swell out to here. They rushed me to CT, do head scans. Didn't have any brain bleeds. I don't know. I got very lucky there. And I started running into a couple small, I wouldn't call them issues, but there was something akin to an issue. I actually had engraftment syndrome. It looked like measles or something. It was very alarming. And they came and did biopsies and all that, and basically just figured out, like, hey, it's just your bone marrow. The new stem cells took way too fast, like way quicker than we expected. Like, you're 2 weeks from the donation or 3 weeks from after the donation, and they're already engrafting. That's a good thing, but it's also maybe not great. Might be too fast. And basically from there, everything just got better. I was in a lot of pain still, just not feeling well. Started coming out of that, came off the pain medicine. And then all my counts started climbing back up to normal amounts. And it got to a point they have a threshold that they can let you go. I went through the whole process. That went from like middle of June to maybe the second week of August. I was in the hospital for that. And then from there, I just recovered at home. I could barely walk out of there under my own power. It was exhausting. The first day I left, I had to stop at the park bench in front of the hospital while my wife went and got the car, which was in a parking garage. And I couldn't walk anymore. I was completely just blown away, exhausted. And I couldn't walk normal. It took me months to regain the ability to actually walk like a normal person. It felt like I had zero muscle mass in my legs, and it was just noodles. So they do checkups basically every week. For the first couple of weeks, it's every single week, 3 times a week. And then after that, it's once a week. And a little bit further on, you do I think it's a 50-day and 100-day bone marrow biopsy. And the 50 was gold. There was no cancer left. Everything was clear. We're talking down to the 0.000%. We're very, very minute. They're using the top end bleeding edge technology to do this now. I was happy with that. I was in remission by far. And then we got to day 100, and they did some testing, and they didn't find cancer cells per se, but they found what the PA referred to them as kind of like zombie cells or trash cells. And they were afraid that if they leave that, it's going to repopulate somehow and it's going to come back as relapse. Basically, they wanted to do something called a donor and lymphocyte infusion, which is technically a salvage treatment. So they wanted to mix it with a T-cell specific chemo called nelarabine as like an experimental process. And basically came up with, look, we're going to hit you hard again. It's not going to be as hard as chemo as it really was before, but it's going to be enough that you might feel it. They did it 3 times. So they did basically just came back and did another small, I would call it a small transplant. I did a final bone marrow biopsy the following year in March of 2022, and it was clear, no more zombie cells or trash cells or anything like that. Everything was clear across the board. And by that time, I was already back in the race. As soon as they said, you're good to go, I was going back to getting in a race car as quick as I could. I went through turns 1, 2, and 3, 4. I came out of turn 5 and I couldn't see anymore because I just had tears streaming down my face. It was at the point to where I was like, man, I'm going to be dangerous on this track. I can't see. I got to pull in. I pulled in, cleared my eyes, and went back out. But it was indescribable. I don't know if I could really capture the feeling. I vastly underestimated the amount of muscle I had. But coming out of cancer, I just wanted to make the lap. I didn't care. I did as many laps as I could, and then basically said I can't do the rest of it because I'm just flat dead. I'm exhausted. I would say I personally feel elated because I'm here. I'm still, I get this extra life to live. But there's a bit of survivor's guilt, I think. It's kind of like, why me? How am I lucky to get this, when I know there's so many others that don't. It's a mix between a little bit of guilt and a little bit of happiness. So my wife, I would have to say, is the one that I lean on the most. I mean, she was there for me the whole process. Every terrible thing that happened, she was there to try to lift me up and try to be that, that boulder to lean on. I think if it wasn't for her, the outcome would have been quite different. I think she allowed me to have that hope and that fight. That kind of warrior spirit that she helped foster that a little bit. Don't delay yourself when you have, these crazy symptoms like I did. I mean, it was ridiculous at the end. But my head was like this big around and I'm still denying it. Like, oh, no, nothing's wrong. Like, clearly something's wrong. Go get checked. You should just take care of yourself. When you have something that doesn't feel off, just go and take care of it. You have to advocate for yourself. Doctors know what they're doing. Especially these highly specialized like hematology oncologists and all them. And you have to advocate for yourself. If you don't, you run the risk of being run over by the medical institution because they'll just do whatever they can do by the book. And they don't, there's no emphasis on urgency. But if you do, you could stay in that kind of lane of trying to get everything done, trying to make sure all your prescriptions are done. It's hard when you have to deal with insurance and all that. So you need to advocate for yourself.